If you're listening to this podcast, I know that you're the type of person who wants to build something really real and meaningful. But with all the constant external pulls in your life, it's often difficult to stay on track, especially with your content. You're probably thinking that if you're not posting something new, something fresh, insightful, original, clever, then what's the point? You're invisible. Well, in today's episode, we'll be exploring long term engagement and how to create content that connects, nurtures, and stays relevant without needing to reinvent yourself every single week. I'm going to cover how to I'm going to cover how to keep your content fresh without burning out, how to use reimagination as your best friend, how to tune into your audience, and use your content ecosystem strategically. And on top of all of that, I'm going to share my own example of what happened when I paused my business and how that still managed to support my long term engagement. If I can do it, you can do it too. Welcome to the Powerful Content Podcast, your go to source for content creation, strategy, and business inspiration. I'm your host, Mel Daniels, content strategist, coach, and speaker, empowering women across the globe to grow their business with powerful content that connects, nurtures, and converts. So, if you're ready to create standout content that gets you noticed and remembered, or build an aligned audience who love you and are ready to buy from you, you're in the right place. I believe that content has the power to connect us all. It's up to you how you use it. Listen in for genuine and insightful chats with guests, as well as practical tools and strategies from me. It's so lovely to have you here. Let's dive into the show. I acknowledge the Wongal people of the Eora Nation as the traditional custodians of the country that I am recording from today. I recognise their continuing connection to the land and waters. I pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all First Nation people listening today. Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to episode 171 of the Powerful Content Podcast. How have you been this past week? I hope you've been well. I've had a few extra shifts at my casual job this week, and hubby went away for an extra long weekend with the boys from baseball, so the time struggle for me has been real. Having even less hours in my business than usual this week has made me really ponder about short-term and long-term views of our business, of content strategy, and especially engagement. I've also been talking about seasons inside of the content effect this month, so I'd love for you to come and join the conversation inside the membership. And then all of this has led me to think about how the peaks and troughs of your time, your energy, and resources impact your business. For me, thinking about all of these things, for me, consistency isn't about being on all the time. It's about showing up in a way that feels easy for you, plays to your strengths, and maintains that level of visibility for your season that you're going through. And it's for this reason that sometimes you need to take a long-term view of engagement rather than a short-term view, which looks like likes or comments on a social media post. So despite all the evidence, and I use air quotes here because, well, I can hardly call social media evidence, but anyway, we're constantly showing this beautiful side of business and life. And despite what you may think, content success is not built overnight. It's this long game of trust, alignment, and presence. It's not about learning how to use AI and then blowing up your business. The goal with your content isn't to constantly come up with something new and exciting every time you sit down and create. That is just exhausting thinking about it. The goal is really to stay connected to yourself and connected to your audience over time. And the moment that you feel that disconnect, that's when it's time to stop and reassess. Now, long-term engagement has nothing to do with how many reels you post a week or how often you show up in stories with a full face of makeup and a clear call to action. Nothing. Long-term engagement is about building simply one thing: trust. And this is a challenge because, let's face it, as a society, we're becoming more and more wary of fake news, the use of AI, and, well, people who are clearly creating content and living in this world to solely serve themselves. But long-term engagement is about creating a space in someone's world and staying there, not being the latest fad or the loudest salesperson. It's your job to be there for them. And those that are your most engaged audience members are often the ones that you rarely hear from. They're the ones quietly watching your content, nodding along to your emails, bookmarking your posts, and remembering how you make them feel, even if they haven't liked or commented once on a social media post. I call them the quiet likers. They don't necessarily publicly show support, but they're there waiting for the right moment to work with you. So, long term engagement may look like a DM from someone who says, I've been following you for a while and I'm finally ready to work with you. It may look like a client referencing a podcast episode you recorded 6 months ago, which does happen to me quite a lot. It might look like someone hitting reply on your weekly email just to say, I needed to hear this. Thank you. These things don't come from content that you've just churned out under pressure or because an expert told you to be more consistent and to do more. They come from content that's intentional, that's aligned, that's thoughtful, that's built over time and anchored in who you are, not what's trending. Now, that's not to say that short-term engagement gains don't have their place in growth. Most definitely they can. And you might find a spike in your own engagement when you talk about particular topics, or you might have something that goes viral, or you might even share something that's super personal, but all of those things are just not sustainable. The reality is, and it's something that most people don't want to hear, is that long-term engagement is a slow burn. It's the result of being the steady, the reliable voice in someone's week. The person who keeps showing up imperfectly, but consistently enough for your people to think, I like her, I like what she says, and I trust her. And I think that that's what builds a community that really sticks, that buy your thing, but keep buying your other things and are the loudest supporters in the room. So now you know why long-term engagement matters. Let's talk about the foundation. How do we support ourselves to bring this longer-term view to our content? And it can be really hard when all the noise out there is to focus on the short-term gains and the short-term trends. Well, if you've been around here a while, you'll know that I like to talk a bit about the 4P framework, which is prepare, plan, produce, and process, because it's more than just a method for getting content done. It's like a content rhythm that really supports your energy, your creativity, and your connection to your audience over time. And funnily enough, it's also going to support you to build long-term engagement. So the first step is to prepare. And long-term engagement begins with clarity and knowing all the things that you could possibly talk about in your content. Clarity about who you're speaking to, what they need, and how you can help with your knowledge. Without it, you're just guessing and your content can begin to feel a little bit wobbly. It might feel rushed or it's reactive instead of proactive. Now, in this first P stage, you come up with all the ideas for your content that you can talk about and think about how that relates to your ideal client. And then this begins to build a really strong foundation that you can come back to again and again, even when you're tired, in a season of pause, or feeling a little flat. The second P is plan, and this is where you map your content in 90-day cycles. And this is so that you don't end up giving into random ideas or last-minute posts. You decide what you're going to say, why it matters, and how it supports both your audience and your business. And when you plan with this purpose, you begin to build momentum, not just the content volume, because we're not just talking about quantity, we're talking about quality. You're also less likely to ghost your audience or post just out of guilt or feeling like you need to, and more likely to show up with meaning and confidence all within your time, energy, and resources. Now, number 3P is produce, and this is about creating content in a way that works with your strengths and lifestyle. It's not about showing up everywhere, every single day. It's about choosing your minimum viable content. And you can go back to episode 167 to find out more about what this is and how you can determine what yours is. But in essence, it's knowing what feels doable, aligned, and meaningful for you. And when you know what type of content feels easy to create and where it's easiest for you to show up, producing it becomes far less overwhelming. Now, the last P is process. And this is leaning into your systems, your structure, and to the power of reimagination. And this is really where the magic happens, because long-term engagement doesn't mean reinventing the wheel every single week. It's about using the core content that you've already created, reshaping it for different platforms, and giving it this beautiful new life for your audience to see again and again. You're not repeating yourself when this happens. You're actually reinforcing what matters. And it's how you stay visible without burning out. It's also where you build the behind the scenes structure that supports you to keep going. So, whether that's a system of storing ideas, a content calendar that actually works for you, or a reminder that you're allowed to press pause. And episode 168 is going to give you plenty of inspiration on how you can reimagine for your own business. Now, by implementing this 4P framework in a way that's aligned to your strengths, you'll really begin to have this rhythm that supports your time, your energy, and aligns with your voice and really centers on your audience. You create the kind of content that doesn't just make noise, it has purpose. And this in turn creates impact and definitely encourages long-term engagement. Now, another way to create long-term engagement is to actually listen, not in a market researchy way necessarily, but in a relationship building way. And I talk about the art of listening in selling in the previous episode 170. So go back and take a listen to that if you can, to get a better idea of how it can help with engagement and selling. But whether you realize it or not, your audience is always giving you clues in the DMs they send you, the replies to your emails, what they're saving, they're sharing, or asking about, the questions they leave unanswered, and what they're talking about in Facebook groups. Listening is what turns content from a monologue into a conversation, a two-way street. And long-term engagement isn't built on broadcasting, it's built on this back and forward of information via content. So when you listen and adapt, you show your audience that you see them, that you understand where they're at, that you're growing with them, not just selling to them. And in my eyes, that builds loyalty and trust like nothing else. Now, I want to make it clear, and I probably should have done this earlier in the podcast, but when I talk about engagement, I'm not just talking about likes or comments on a social media post. Social media, as we know, is such a fickle beast. And it's built for entertainment these days, something that us solopreneurs don't often have the bandwidth to create. And that's why a strong content ecosystem is such a powerful tool. You don't need to be everywhere, but you do need to think about how and where your audience experiences you and where you love to show up. So let's face it, not everyone sees everything the first time or necessarily takes it in the first time. When you spread out your message thoughtfully, you increase the chance of someone hearing the exact thing that they needed at the exact moment that they were ready for it. And inside the content effect this month, I've been talking about the idea of content seasons. Just like life and business move through cycles, so does your content. So you might be in a growth season, which is more about visibility, more output, more energy. You might be in a maintenance season, holding the fort and staying steady and strong with your minimum viable content. Or you might be in a reset or pause season like I was, stepping back, regrouping, and realigning. Each season asks for something different from you. And when you honor that, you build something sustainable. Your engagement doesn't suffer just because you're going through a particular season. It is built to last. Now, you may be thinking this is all well and good in theory, Mel, but what about real life? How does it apply? Well, I feel as though I'm probably more than qualified to talk about what happens to engagement when you step away. Back in episode 166, I explained why I pressed pause on my business and how 6 months later, I've still got only 10 hours a week to spend on my business. Now, due to an energy shift, I relied and still rely on my version of minimum viable content to get me through each week. Now, it's a little bit different now than what it was before, but minimum viable content is always changing. And my minimum viable content at the moment is 1 podcast episode, 2 emails, and a few social media posts here and there when I feel like it. Whilst there hasn't been any upward shifts in engagement in the short term, there have been no downward shifts, and I kind of take that as a win. Downloads of my podcast have remained stable, as have my open rates and click-through rates for emails. Reach for social media, well, what there is of it has also remained stable for my socials. So what I've seen is just because I've decreased the amount of time in my business and on my content, it has not negatively impacted the stability of my business. So I feel as though my relationship with you, my podcast listeners, as well as my email subscribers, has actually strengthened, if anything. So I know that when I'm ready to switch back into that growth mode, that growth season, I'll have an engaged audience who is ready to come. I'll have an engaged audience who is ready to come along with me. And I think the key learning from me in all of this has been that you don't need to show up perfectly or endlessly to build long-term trust. You just need to show up intentionally with honesty, with heart, and a little bit of strategy too. As always, before we wrap up, I want to give you a few prompts to take your understanding and impact of this episode a little deeper. I truly, truly believe that it's not just about the strategy. It's about how you want to feel in your business, how you want to show up, and what long-term engagement really looks like for you, because it's different for all of us. So grab a pen, open a notes app, or take a quiet moment and explore these questions. Number one is, what does long-term engagement mean to me? Not just for my audience, but for me. What do I want to feel consistently? What do I want my audience to keep coming back for? Number two is, where am I currently putting pressure on myself to be fresh, to be new, or to be exciting? Is that pressure coming from me or what I think I should be doing? And the last question is, which season of content am I in right now? Growth, maintenance, or reset? And what would it look like to actually honor that instead of resisting it? Okay, so let's wrap up this episode with a reminder. You and your content does not need to be everywhere. It just needs to be true to you and relevant to your audience. Long-term engagement is not built on a sprint. It's built in the slow, the steady moments where you keep showing up with intention in a way that really honors where you are right now. And if this episode has sparked something for you, then please, I would love if you would share it with someone who needs to hear it, or come and continue the conversation with us over inside of my membership, The Content Effect. Here's to building a business that lasts throughout the season. Talk soon. Thanks so much for listening. That's it for another week. To get more powerful content in your life, make sure you're following along on socials. My handle is @meldbusiness. And just in case you're wondering, the groovy music for this podcast was created by Just Here on SoundCloud. I'd also be super grateful if you took a moment to rate and review this podcast so more amazing women like you can experience the power of content. And if you're like, hell Mel, stop talking, I'm ready to work with you now, here's how we can work some powerful content magic together. Firstly, come and join the Content Effect, my membership inspiring women with service-based businesses to ditch the content chaos and start creating stand-out content that gets you noticed and makes sales. You can join us by using the link in the show notes or just Google the Content Effect. The second way we can work together is via my one-on-one packages. We can create a sustainable content strategy or start to build out your client journey. It's up to you. Hop on over to meldbusinessservices.com.au/services to find out more. Until next time, have a beautiful week and embrace the power of your content.